The COYGIG Pod on OTB Sports, in association with Cadbury. A player and a half deserves a glass and a half of support.
Top pocket goal!
It's what dreams are made of.
They are going to the World Cup Finals!
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the COYGIG Podcast. My name is Kathleen McNamee, and as ever I am joined by former Ireland internationals Karen Duggan and Emma Byrne. The WSL season hasn't quite started up yet, but we decided that we wanted to give you a little something to tie you over until that does actually come back. So we have a special episode coming to you this week with Reading captain and Scotland international Emma Mitchell. Now, she has been around for a long time. She has played with our very own Emma Byrne. They even roomed together back in the day. But in the last year, she had a baby and she returned to football after having her baby, and she wanted to talk about that experience, what it's like to be a pregnant woman in women's football at the moment, and also what it's like to recover and come back both physically and mentally. It's such a good chat, and you've definitely something that, you know, should be paid attention to in the league, because she raises some really interesting points. Now, we are very lucky to be joined on the podcast this week by Reading and Scotland's Emma Mitchell, who is a dear friend to many on this podcast. I was saying to Emma Byrne earlier that I was watching old videos of the two of you guys when you first moved in together, I think it was, doing quizzes, and you'd only
Did they have videos back then, or was it like a picture?
Stop. Of course they did. Mitch is only a young and she's only spring chicken. Which I mean, I was just about to retire.
But thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. Emma, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. All good.
How have you found this season so far? Obviously, we're going to get into a bit later in the podcast that you just came back recently from having a very gorgeous baby, which Catherine, our producer, and I were cooing over in the office earlier with the photos. Absolutely stunning. But how have you found the season just generally so far?
I mean, it's been pretty difficult, to be honest with us. Like, we're sitting, I think, second bottom of the league, so I think we've got 7 points maybe. So I think that's probably going to be enough for us to stay up, which is good. Like, when we spoke at the start of the season, they basically had says to us that like we just need to survive and stay in the league. So for us to have like 7 points on the board, then we've obviously beat Leicester. Then that, like, at least that's looking positive. But kind of it's quite hard some weeks going on knowing that you're going to get beat again at the weekend. But like, that's all right. Like, it's been fine.
What was the general chat like, I suppose, with the season wrapping up? Was it kind of a thing of saying to the players, you know, okay, we have some time off now, the next games aren't until like halfway through January, this is time to kind of like mentally get yourself into a good place for the second half of the season so that you can push on? There has been some interesting results for you guys as well. You know, it hasn't all been bad.
I think this has kind of been like a bad time for us to have the break, to be honest, because even though that, I mean, we got beat for Chelsea and stuff last weekend, but the performance, I thought, probably in the second half, like, there's been loads of positives to take, like, in the recent couple of weeks. So I think for us, it's been like bad timing almost with the Christmas break. But at the same time, like, it is nice because, I mean, you've been in for since like the middle of July. So like, that's been however many months that is. So you are ready to like kind of switch off again. But at the same time, like, you say that, but you still got to do some training and that over the Christmas break and stuff as well. So it's not like you just get to like do nothing for like 2 weeks sort of stuff. But I mean, it'd be good to just not have to drive to Reading every day and get home and see the fam for a bit as well.
And was that a big transition from you, say, going from Arsenal, who were title winners, to a club that are just looking to survive? Was that a shift in mentality for you, or were you just happy to do that challenge? Was it the same? You apply yourself the same?
I think the hardest thing when it comes to stuff like that is like the players that you then play with, like, you can't say nothing to any of the girls in the team because they just cry. Whereas like you're used to like at a team like Arsenal, like people shouting at you and like demanding more of you because that's just the level. Whereas like I find it hard going into training and still trying to keep your own standards like really, really high and demand more of other players without crossing the line, because you're just not really sure how like certain players are going to react because they're just never used to it. They've never been in that winning environment and knows what it takes. So like then it's difficult to then raise the standards and keep demanding more of players when it's hard, because sometimes you're like, are they actually giving their best level? Is this like what they're at? Or are they just like, they just didn't know what it takes? So I think that's definitely been a difficult transition, I think, when it comes to that side of stuff. But
yeah, but this is the new
generation. Is that generational more than?
I don't know, maybe it could be like, it's like it is one of the things, like
it totally is. I mean, even when I go to games and I look at goalkeepers, it doesn't matter where, like with Barca or in the WSL, I'm looking at the goalkeepers and they're quiet. I'm like, why are you not giving her an absolute, I'm not going to say the word, she's like messed up 3 times in a row. I'd be taking her head off, and they don't say anything. They're so nice. And I'd say it to some of the keepers I know, why don't you like have a go at them for doing that? And they're like, oh, what's the point? They know they've made a mistake. I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe I could have been a little bit like that. But I think it's just the generations, just how it's going. This new coaching system as well. It's all about, you know, trying to lift them up and trying to take care of them, rather than the way we would have known the managers going mental at us for making a mistake. It's how it's going. This new FA DNA as well. This is what it's all about.
All right, okay.
I think when it comes to that as well, though, like sometimes, like when I'm sitting in players, you know, speaking to each other because you know got the confidence to do it, or like do you know actually know what to say? Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes, like especially when it comes to goalies and that, I'm like, why are you know demanding for your back line to get up or like to go like, do you know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't know if people watch football anymore in the same way as maybe that we used to doing that as well. Like when I asked the girls, like, what did you do last night? They're like, I'm like, did you watch the game? They're like, nah, we didn't even really watch football. Like, I'm like, all right, like it's your job.
It's so true. One of the first things, like when I started, was that the coaches always said, you have to be a student of the game. You have to study football. And I was a bit like them. I was like, no, I want to go out with my mates. I don't want to watch that game. But it's true. You have to watch it, and you have to watch people in your position. And a lot of players don't do that anymore. A lot of them don't. Yeah, you're right.
Has taken on the captaincy given you any sort of like, I don't know, higher voice or an ability to maybe approach players a bit more about this sort of thing?
To be honest, I was really surprised that I got given that, because I think when it comes to like me on a day-to-day, like I'm actually pretty, because like obviously I have to drop in myself at nursery and go in and stuff, like I didn't really have like that much time. Like I wouldn't necessarily say like I spend a lot of time with the girls away from being like in the gym or on the pitch and stuff. Like I end up doing my own gym sessions in the afternoon because I've got to leave by 2:45 to get back and picking us up for nursery. So I think the reason that she probably gave me it is just probably because the way that I train and I try and carry myself and do things like the right way and stuff, like probably more so for that rather than actually being on the pitch like shouting at people, because you didn't really get a reaction from them anyway. So like you kind of waste your time sometimes when it is like that. And I think when it comes to stuff like that, that really probably has to start for the coaches and that as well. Like you can't be like the player that's shouting at like your head off on the pitch at players when you didn't really get that for the coaching staff. So I would never want to come across like there's that like a bully or whatever, because you end up getting like branded that as well when like you start demanding for players that maybe didn't realise like what it takes. So no, I definitely say I'm pretty calm, to be honest.
And you mentioned obviously that it was a bit of a surprise getting it because you are so busy and you do have your hands full. For anyone who maybe doesn't know your story and listens to the podcast, could you explain about the last few months to a year that you've had, which has been pretty hectic, but I imagine pretty special as well?
Well, I probably in the last like year it's just been really busy, but no, we had a baby. Basically COVID happened, our wedding got cancelled, so we just thought like we've got like this kind of like this time frame basically, that because we knew that we were going to the Euros as well with the national team, that we were just like, right, let's just have like try and have a baby. And literally like just happened really, really quickly. And then 9 months later Innes was born. So I think I went back just to start a pre-season there. So I hadn't really even like run or anything before that. I had like a bit of an issue actually just like with my pelvic floor and stuff. So I had to get that sorted before I could go back. So I've only actually really been running and back playing since I started pre-season. So when I think about, like if I was to look back at this year, I probably didn't really give myself enough credit to be like, this is where you're at. Because like, yeah, it's been a massive change, obviously, just for my body, but just family life and your time, like how you've got to manage that, like that's been probably the most challenging bit rather than actually physically being coming back. So no, it's the best thing ever, but it's like, it's tough some days.
How long was it between Innes being born and then you actually getting back on the pitch? What was the time frame for that?
Wait, I need to count my fingers. December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So like 7.5 months, I think it was, by the time that I had it then went back.
Which is insane when you think about it. Like, as you say, the changes your body goes through, the intensity of that experience, and even like organizing everything outside of that, you know, just organizing your life. That's an insanely short amount of time to get back on the pitch.
Well, isn't it incredible the way Mitchie said it was more difficult to have her life organized, like dropping in this, blah, 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 than getting physically back to where she wanted to be. I mean, that's incredible for me, where it should be the other way around, really, shouldn't it?
I just think when it comes to stuff like that, I think because you just got like that as a footballer, you just think that even if you've got like a long-term injury, it's just like, how do you get back onto the pitch as soon as you possibly could? So I think it was just like when I was at training, and still is the same now, like you didn't really think about being a mum and that, like the mum side of stuff, until you've got to then pick her back up on stuff like that. That's when you switch on to being the mum again. So yeah, I think when you're actually there and you're just at training, you just think about being a footballer. There's no really that both. So I think that made it easy. And obviously Ivan's like an S&C fitness guy, so he was like, right, get on the bike, move.
The best were you all those years ago when you first met?
But no, it is unbelievable, and I think that's probably why it's important to speak about, because it is doable. Just obviously got to have the right support around you, and probably a good club that's going to be patient and give you the time to get back, because it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. And training and stuff of getting back, that's another thing, like an issue, that clubs aren't educated in that field, are they, on how to train a very new mom to get back to fitness, right? It's all still a little bit up in the air.
Well, there's not really like any research on it, especially for like footballers, because I think they've done like a lot of stuff on like running and just like getting back running. But obviously we've got this contact, then trying to kick a ball at the same time, when you've got really weak like pelvic floor and stuff, you basically just pee yourself, girls, not going to lie. So yeah, like we almost like, we were quite lucky that, well, I was quite lucky that we are kind of, because there's no any research, like, and every single pregnancy is completely different. If you had the C-section or you had a natural birth or like whatever, or then everybody's recovery is going to be so different. So even if there was research, there'd only be so much that is going to be applicable to like you as the returning athlete who's been the mum. So yeah, that was quite tough, because every single day it was just like, well, how are you feeling today? Like, you could do this, you could do that. So yeah, there's no really like any blueprint when it comes to the rehab side of stuff, I think, when it comes to return to football anyway. So definitely have to like invest more into that side of the game.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have teammates to bounce it off. You're really looking at your friends outside of sport who've gone through it. Like, can't have those chats every day in training.
No, like literally nobody. Like, I remember when I first went back and I was sitting in the cupboard basically pumping as well, because like I was still breastfeeding at the time, and like just that kind of experience, like the girls are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I've got to do this. And they're just, I didn't know, sometimes didn't really want to engage in the conversation, because you kind of like, they've not got the experience to even speak about it. So you're just kind of like, like plodding along yourself, just trying to get stuff done.
How did you find, I suppose, like the conversations with both the national team and your club, like both when you became pregnant and being like, okay, well, this is what I need. Like, I'm not entirely sure how long you actually played for during because it was during COVID. So was there much of your pregnancy that you were playing, or was it pretty much all?
I think it was a season that we came back after COVID. So I think I played up until I was like 8 weeks. I remember playing, we played, I never really got morning sickness, but I used to feel really, really sick like later on in the afternoon, and we played Bristol away in like a night game. And it was like, I had the pre-match and I was like, oh, like I was literally like running. We ended up getting beat actually that night as well. And I just thought, I can't do this any longer, because like you just end up kind of running a wee bit weird. Just like, I've got a little baby in my belly, and like you didn't want to get hit, and like that's not my game. Like I like to hit folk. So yeah, like I then had to fake an injury, because I didn't want to tell people that I was pregnant until the 12-week scan. Just because you didn't know if everything's going to be all right. So that was pretty tough. I then did have to tell the coach, because it was probably no right that I'd kept it for that long anyway. But at the same time, you didn't really want to. I think at the time in that as well, there was nothing in the contracts to say that if you were pregnant, there was no any support put in place. So I didn't want to tell anybody in case it didn't go down well. Then obviously you're a bit like, well, they can't sack you because you could basically sue them. So I kind of had that on my side as well, but not like they. I mean, I'm not really sure if everybody was buzzing for me, but they obviously said that they were. Then after that, I just kind of done my own bit of training, which when I look back, it was actually really, really lonely, like, which is quite sad to think about it, but you just kind of get left to do your own thing. I think that's another thing. There's not really that much research on that side of stuff to say how much like you can and can't do. So every single day, like I basically just went on the bike. Then when I got too heavy, I just went swimming. And I felt that I had to go to training every day as well, just because they were still paying me. So I felt under pressure to still be at the training ground every single day. Like, even at like 40 weeks, I was still going in because I just was like, well, maybe not actually 40 weeks because I think I broke off 39 maybe. And she was 2 weeks late anyway. So, but yeah, like that. I think that was pretty tough because at least like if you do like, you've got like a long-term injury and that, you have like a program and like there's milestones to hit and like you start progressing and the coaches show a little bit more interest in you because you're closer to being back and like more useful for them, whereas like you're pregnant and you're out for 9 months and probably another, I was 7 at the back of that you're no good to the team, so you do just kind of get like left to the side. And yeah, but I mean everybody would probably be the same. Maybe that's just, or maybe they just didn't like me, I'm not really sure.
No, it is lonely when you're training on your own, like whether you're injured or not. And because you knew that you weren't coming back anytime soon, that would be mentally difficult for me to have to go in every day and train if I knew realistically I wasn't coming back for over a year later or whatever. That's difficult.
No, that was definitely the hardest bit about it, just trying to like be motivated to still. I knew that if I still kept doing stuff, it'd be easier to get back after giving birth. So like that was kind of like my motivation as such. But yeah, like it was just the same conversations like every single day. You'd go and you'd do your bike or you'd go to the pool and do your 100 lengths or whatever it was. I think I swam for like an hour every single day. But then you just be like, this is so tedious. Then I broke off, I think, 2 weeks before my due date. Then Innes was there for like another month basically after that. So you still kind of want to have like some like normal routine to your life because then everything just completely changes after that. So I think that was probably why I went in as well, alongside like the guilty feeling like I had to be there.
No, that totally makes sense that you would feel like that. And I think it's weird because in the WSL anyways, there was kind of like a bigger but still not great conversation around that sort of thing whenever Alex Morgan joined the league, and obviously that was just after she had baby Charlie. But before that, I can't really remember any massive conversations about it, and even you talking about it now, it's probably one of the first like proper first-hand accounts I've heard of what it's like having a baby, playing in the league, having that sense of like guilt over like, oh well, I should be there because I'm being paid, but also I'm kind of lonely and I like the support and of being around people, but also I feel like a bit of a spare part on the outside of it as well. When you actually had Dennis, did you step away from the club for a while? Like, were you just totally wrapped up in being a new mother and getting used to that sort of stuff? Or like, when did football start creeping back into your mind, I suppose is the best way to put it?
No, I just totally switched off then. I was like, I'm just going to be a mum now, because I really didn't, after I had this, like I was really wary, being like, I didn't really want to miss this time just being like a mum, because I knew at some point I'd have to go back and she'd go to nursery and it'd have to do like a bit of the both. So yeah, for the first, I remember taking her in to Reading to let them see her, I think after like 4 months, and I thought, right, maybe like I maybe start thinking about going back. But bear in mind, this is only 16 weeks after I gave birth. Like, that was just so stupid. But I went and looked at a nursery at this point, and I remember going in and like I literally cried when I was there, and I phoned Ivan and I was like, I can't do this, like I can't drop her, like I can't like leave her yet and go back training. So for me, I'm kind of glad that I'd done that, because then I knew at the same time I was like, I wasn't ready, like probably more mentally to go back then. But yeah, probably the first 6 months I was just at home doing my thing, me and Innes chilling. Then I was like, right, the new season's going to start coming, like I think I could get back and play. So yeah, probably around the summertime, probably more so when Ivan's, like, he works in football as well, so when his season finished at the end of May time, I think it would have been. I had like more time because like Ivan was at home and I could get time to myself to then maybe start going and do some more training. Like obviously then I started to run. Then I had the issue with the pelvic floor, so then I had to step back again and make sure that was all fine before I did, because obviously if you didn't get it sorted, you could have like longer term like women problems down there. So yeah, that was quite a big thing. Then like once that was sorted, they were like, look, green light, on you go, you could go back running and training and stuff. I just had to do basically like pelvic floor exercises and like my prehab and that. But yeah, then it was that back into full training, and here I am.
Doing great. And then you said that the kind of tougher part was sorting your life more so than maybe the physical side, which you could kind of treat more like almost coming back from a long-term injury. What does a day that includes, say, like either training or a match look like for you now with the baby?
Like I have to set my alarm at like 6:30 because I need to wake up before Ines does, so I could actually have breakfast and get myself ready. That's if she sleeps until, if she doesn't wake up before that anyway, that's a good sign. That's a good start to the day. Then basically we have to leave here at 7:30 to drop her off at 8:00 for nursery. Then I drive to Reading, and usually I'm late every single day because I caught an M25, so usually I get there for 10:00. Then we just have either a morning meeting, training. Then after lunch we didn't come off the pitch until about 1:45, so then I have to do a quick gym session if we've got gym. Then I have to leave by 2:45 to get back to pick her up at 4:00. Then we come back, then we play for a bit, then I have to make the tea, then give her tea, then put her in the bath, then put her to her bed. And I didn't actually think I sit down until about 7:00 at night. Then I have to be in my bed for 9:00 to then be able to get a decent sleep and hope that she sleeps the whole night before getting up at 6:30 again. So like it's like full on, but I think you just get on with it. Like I just feel like if you speak to any of them like parent and that, everybody's the exact same. Like it's not really any different if you play football or you work in a school or whatever. You're just on like this, what they call like a hamster wheel that just keeps going and going and going. Then
Yeah, but the difference with you is sometimes you have to work on Saturday and Sunday. So on Sundays, for example, if Ivan's working as well, there aren't any nurseries open, are there? What do you do?
Then we just rely on like Ivan's auntie or his mum or something. Like some of the days are tough, like on a Saturday if Ivan, he's got a game, he's always off on a Sunday, which is fine, and we usually play on a Sunday, so that is all right. Saturdays, because the club have basically turned around and told me as well that I can't take Ines into the training ground, which that's an issue that I'm dealing with through like the PFA and stuff for like more sport when it comes to it, that I've had to basically say to them, if I can't get childcare, I'll not be coming to training. And obviously, like if I can't get somebody in Ivan's family to watch her and stuff, like, which is a big ask for them as well, because they've got their own families all working that as well. The last thing they want is probably there's a little baby on like your doorstep. But no, they have been like really helpful. But yeah, like if a Sunday was to come, and obviously if Ivan was at work or whatever and I couldn't get childcare, then I can't play that game. So
it's mad to think of, really. It seems kind of archaic, like that's something you'd hear 50 years ago. We would have thought that the progression of the WSL at this point would be forward thinking in that regard.
I feel like, see, when it comes to like the whole maternity stuff that they put out in that, it's such like, they've put like this policy out, and I feel like there's such a grey area, like, and it's basically going to come down to like, depending on whatever club that you're at, like if you're at an Arsenal or a Chelsea or a Man City and that, you've got like loads of money and you've got these great facilities and that, having a baby there's no an issue at all. But I think the lower down the leagues you go, and then money comes in and facilities and stuff like that, then it's easier for clubs and CEOs to be like, no, this isn't happening. So I think that when it comes to it, it's almost be like if you were to tear your ACL, for example, and you play it like Reading, you're going to get looked after when it comes to that. But I do definitely think that there's still not enough stuff in place to make women feel like that they actually could do it, because it's just like basically they have done like this policy, puts them in like, I mean, the policy is only like you only get 14 weeks full pay, then you've got to go back to your work. Like if I was to have a kid now, I didn't think I'd be able to return after 14 weeks after giving birth, because bearing in mind our body is our job. So who's even came up with that? Surely somebody that's not played football and had a baby. Do you know what I mean? Is that a man? Like it had to be a man. A man was definitely involved in that. So I think there is like that, but again, same time, I think it's going to then come down to the clubs. Like I think if you're one of the top teams, you're probably going to get looked after. They maybe get a nanny in for you and like things like that. Whereas at the other clubs, they're just going to say like, well, we can't afford to be doing that, so you're just going to have the day off, or you're just not going to play that game. Which then you have to think about, well, come the end of the season and getting a new contract, they're going to use that against you. So I don't know. It's quite hard, isn't it? Like,
it actually hasn't progressed at all. I mean, it still is a case of, do you really want to have a baby or do you want to play football? That's still, you're still trying to balance that, where it shouldn't have to balance it. You should be thinking about, having your baby and still playing football. But it's really difficult to do, especially if you don't have a support network around you, as in your family. And it's always different, isn't it, when it's your mom that's around or your sister. The husband's family. It's difficult to ask the husband's family, but yeah, it still is that question: do you want to have a baby or do you want to play football? Like, and it shouldn't be at the end.
And especially like as well when there's more and more like foreign players coming to play in England. Like say like nobody's going to then go and here I am, because actually this isn't my country and we're married here, so like but I can't imagine like many foreign players are then going to come to England and live happily ever after. They'd probably be like, I'm going to go back home and have kids. So maybe that's the reason that FA's not really put so much stuff in. But I don't know. I just don't think it's good enough.
And is there a reason why you can't take Innes into the club with you? Like, is it just a policy, a general one they have, or is there more specific reasoning behind it?
They basically had said that it was a club policy and that they didn't have the right insurance to cover in case anything was to happen. But I just feel like that's a bit of a cop-out, to be honest, because they know that the men didn't have to take their kids in because they're in, I don't know, 10 grand a week, so they could afford that their wife just sits at home and watches the kids, or they could afford the nanny. So when it comes to them not having childcare, they didn't have to ever worry about not having childcare. And I think because it's never probably happened at a club like Reading, it's probably just easier to be that we just have this policy that there's no kids, so and that's their answer to it, rather than actually. For me, I was a wee bit more disappointed because they never even came and spoke to me. It was just like this email that got put out.
Generally.
Yeah, which I felt it was pretty directed at myself, which I thought, if this is about me, then why do we not have a conversation and let me explain why she's here and see if there's anything that we could do to actually help, rather than just kind of shut the door on it. So like I said, I spoke to the PFA and I think that they're now communicating with the CEO and the club to see what solutions there is, because they're basically like, no, we're not having that. So yeah, hopefully there's a solution that comes to it.
This is like the general email makes no sense whatsoever, because like you're the only person on the team with the baby, so
yeah. So it was like, this is exactly like me. And you know what? It's not even a case of like I didn't spend like money on like childcare. We already pay over £1,000 a month just for 3 days of the week anyway. So do you know what I mean? I could understand if they're like every single day I'm taking her in, but it's only on the days when I genuinely can't get anybody to look after her. And like, she's not a problem. Like, she just comes in and sits there. She's happy as Larry, and I train and I leave again. So, but yeah, I just didn't think that some were quite there to be still quite that, like, it's a men's, it sometimes feels like it's still like a men's game and we're just living in it, if that makes sense. Like,
Well, how do the Americans do it? They seem to have it all sorted. They have nannies that come in and will look after players' babies while they train.
It depends on the clubs you're based at. Certain clubs are better. Like, I remember Orlando Pride had that, where they had like a traveling nanny. So if there was like an away game or whatever and players wanted to bring their kids with them, like they would bring they'd fly the nannies wherever they're going, and then they would look after them. And I don't know, they always looked like they were in those sort of like corporate boxes or something along the edges of pitches, or else they're in some sort of room within the stadium. But I think it's very dependent about where you're playing.
So again, it's awful that it's coming down to money.
Yeah. Like, there was always those great videos of Sydney Leroux and the photos of her breastfeeding her 2 kids, like at halftime and at the end of matches that she just played, because like obviously she had to. And I always just thought they were such great iconic images that should have made more of an impact than they did at the time, in terms of clubs setting up and being like, oh, we need to do more to support the mothers in the game. Because I feel like there are increasingly more and more players as well choosing to have babies while still in their playing career. I don't know, there's been quite a few the last couple of years. between different leagues that I've noticed. I don't know if that's because
they should be able to. There shouldn't be a surprise, shouldn't be an eyebrow raiser, but again, depends on the club.
Yeah. Also, the other thing that they do in the US quite well is they actually talk to players about what they want to do in terms of fertility treatment. So say if a player chooses that they don't want, like it's written into their contracts that they're entitled to, say, freeze eggs or like go through those sort of treatments through the club, because obviously you're committing your earlier years, which people say are better to have a child during, to the club and to football. So they're like, okay, well, we'll give you more options out the other side so that you're not losing out on anything, which is also an important part of the conversation to have in general, I think. So I don't really think that's a major part in any contracts in the WSL. I think maybe Chelsea, but that might be it.
That's really
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then you should go over and just play in the US.
That just shows you how far behind it I mean, the fact that there's only been someone written into the contracts this year, and what year we're in, like 2022, is just mental. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. I remember Katie Chapman, when she was having her babies at Arsenal, it was just down to the club. And the club were very, very good. Like, they allowed players' kids to come in whenever they wanted to travel. But that was just because it was our manager's decision. And I never felt other people, like if I had a baby, maybe I wouldn't have got that treatment, or another player. It just depends on who the manager wanted to allow that to happen. And I just thought that was very unfair as well, because players that I played with who had fallen pregnant just stopped playing. They just left because it wasn't really an option to come back even. 1 year contracts all the time. By the time that contract's up, it wouldn't really be renewed, or there wouldn't be a discussion. So it has improved a little bit, but not enough, as you say.
No, you're literally preventing people from doing their job. Like, it goes against any sort of employment law or any like theory behind employment law in the world. Like, if it was any other role and you were literally felt like the best thing you can do is drop out, then that's just not how it should be operating. Like, I don't know, do you feel like it's a sort of thing that, I know you said that if you're at like a Chelsea or an Arsenal or a City, there probably are those sort of supports in place and not so much of a Reading. Do you think this should be much more centralized to like the FA and the WSL, with them saying, okay, here's our contract policy, we have this fund in place to help support clubs that need it, to make sure that players get everything they want? Because I know, like, in international organizations that work with players, they've all said, like FIFPro and stuff, these players need to be given much better support than what they're getting right now.
I think, like, when it comes to stuff like that, like, there just needs to be, right, so if she's pregnant, she needs to have some, like, a physio that basically leads her whole, like, pre and postnatal, like, rehab, like, whether that's going to be like a consultant at the clubs have to get in, or you've got to go and see, then that's got to be just like the basic care. Because if you've done your ACL, you wouldn't know have a physio. Do you know what I mean? So, like, stuff like that, I just feel like that because there's no actual, they've basically made a policy that just talks about money, and as if like they've been like, well, we'll just make sure that she's covered for 14 weeks after she's had her kid, then like that's us played her part, then the rest of the clubs and you could just support her in whichever way you see fit. Then clubs then are going sitting and saying, thinking, well, what does that even look like? Like, how do we actually support somebody that's had a baby, like who's pregnant and having a baby, to get back? So I don't know, like, I feel like now, like, I'm not sure if I would have a baby again. I think I'll probably wait until I'm finished playing now to have our next one, just because there's still so much barriers to overcome that I'm not sure that how much it would be worth actually doing again. But then especially having two. Do you imagine I couldn't get childcare for two kids, or couldn't allow two of them to come in? Like, it would just be a nightmare.
Yeah, I think that's really sad, because again, you will be the kind of blueprint and people will be like, oh, she found it really difficult, maybe I'll wait. And then they don't have the options, like Kathleen said, of having their eggs frozen, supported in that way. So yeah, it's disappointing, I suppose. Hopefully it'll change in the near future, but it needs to be very near.
Yeah.
We need to have like 5 more Innes's and give one to me, one to Karen, one to Karen.
I mean, she looks absolutely adorable. I would, if I was closer, I would definitely be offering my babysitting services right now. But sadly,
I did. She refused me. I don't know why.
Coming up, actually, I could hear her like in the background somewhere. She's crying, or she was crying.
Tell Ivan to do his job. Shout down to him.
Job. Which one's that? Aye, is she going in the bath? Aye. She going in the bath? Why no?
I feel like this is giving our listeners a proper insight into everything.
Huh? Is she not going in?
Emma's just boss. Emma's the boss, right? It's so obvious. She's the 100%. Boss. That's
I feel like that's just a general thread with this podcast of people called Emma. We had 3 today alone.
Yeah, I'm getting bullied here.
And then what was it like on the national setup side? Because obviously you're not with them as much, but still, I saw a very nice video of you bringing us into camp with you when you went back.
I mean, I never had to, like, when I found out that I was pregnant, I actually think I was pregnant the last time that I played with the national team, because I remember playing and thinking, oh my God, feels so bad. That was whenever that was. Then obviously announced I was pregnant then, so they knew that I wasn't going to come back. But then Pedro had phoned me just before the last qualifiers in September asking me if I was wanting to be. I was like, well, I'm back playing and stuff like that. It's up to you if you want to select me. But if that's the case, then and this has to come, which the SFA and that never had really any qualms about saying no to. But I think because obviously like FIFPro came in and said all this stuff that if they want to travel, that you have to make sure that they've got somebody on board. And I was able to bring a nanny, and Innes was able to come, like, absolutely no problem. So that was good. It was really nice being back with the girls. Obviously, like, Innes loved being there. The girls loved having Innes there as well. So just a wee bit difficult on the travel days and stuff, like trying to get through the airport and stuff. Where like you literally had to take so much things, like a car seat, your pram, a suitcase, like the nappy stuff. Like literally, like that was quite difficult. Like trying to do that. Some of the flights on the way back by myself and that, but no, like the SFA was really accommodating, to be fair. Like they'd make sure that like my nanny had like her own room, and I mean it's not like any really extra cost when it comes to food, because they make so much food anyway that you just make a little bowl for Innes. But no, like it was fine, like it was good. It was enjoyable being back, and like it just obviously saves a lot of hassle knowing that I didn't have to get a babysitter for like 10 days.
That makes sense. Not only is it going to cost you a pretty penny, like it is a long time to be away.
Yeah. I won't even leave my dogs for 10 days.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine it. And actually, I've said that to Ivan. I'm like, I guess you never really think about it for like the dad's side of like, because I would hate it if he was to go and take Innes away for like 10 days. But like, he's just like, oh, well, I'm like, well, she's coming. So he doesn't really get a choice in that. So it must be quite hard for him as well, because they change so quickly as well, like, especially like when they're so young, that 10 days away must be quite hard for Ivan.
He's all right. He's fine.
Good kid.
Emma, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this evening. It's been a really, really interesting chat, and I feel like you've got all 3 of us fired up now to go and fight the FA over this issue. But best of luck with it, and best of luck with the rest of the season as well.
No, thanks very much.
That's all for today's episode. The COYGIG Pod on OTB Sports is in association with Cadbury FC, official snack partner to the Republic of Ireland women's national team. We will be back with you next week with all the WSL action from the opening weekend after the break, and some very big ones. Arsenal, Chelsea in particular is going to be a great setting, and lots of tickets already sold for that one. So expect a stellar crowd and lots of great action on the pitch. But until then, we will see you next week.
The COYGIG Pod on OTB Sports, in association with Cadbury. A player and a half deserves a glass and a half of support.